The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
I had mentioned before there's a lot of true crime news, and I wanted to, before we get into our final series of the year and do our holiday stuff, I wanted to touch on some of those things. And I don't know how many episodes this is, but to give people an idea of what's happening in the fall here, we have at least one or two update style episodes today, depending on how long this one goes, might be two. And then we're going to do, we have a case we want to cover sort of that has some Supreme Court stuff going on with it that I found very interesting, and I could not resist recording an episode on it. And then you and I have done some work on, I want to say a serial killer, but that's the wrong way to describe the case we're going to cover. I'll say it this way. We picked a known case that's not well known that involves multiple serial killers, and this sort of confluence of time where authorities didn't really know who did what for a minute. That's coming out, and that'll be a multi-part series. I think it'll probably pop up between Halloween and Thanksgiving, kind of. And of course, at the beginning of December, we will have our holiday starts, and it looks like we're on track to have about 25 finished episodes. So basically from roughly December 1st or like the night before through Christmas, there will be a new Home for the Holidays series, which in that case, we cover kind of the gamut in terms of like what crimes occurred. But what we're really focused on are interesting cases of wrongful convictions and exonerations. And some of them are brand new and some of them are 30 years old, but some of them are quite infuriating. That's what will be running in the feed until then. But what I wanted to do today was I wanted to go back and cover some things that have happened on cases that we've talked about or mentioned in true crime news along the way. I'm still working. There might be one additional episode. We got into this strange situation. We use Zencastr right now. Meg and I record on Zencastr, and we use Zencastr for our distribution. And they've changed their model some where we're part of their Creator Plus network, which means there's promotion and other things that are sort of provided to us in exchange for us having a Zencastr ad that runs with us and using their website and using their services. When they changed their model, we lost some episodes to archive that I guess I have to talk to them about that. We may have to actually buy them back or change the way that we use Zencastr, at least for a little while, to get those episodes back. There's at least 2 or 3 in there that I think would be worth putting in the feed. But again, that may not happen until season 6, the way things are going right now, because we've been pretty busy. It's a lot to put together the sources and to do the research on the holiday episodes. And you and I, we start working on those, and I present a list in the summer, and then we narrow it down and we start recording it sometime in September and October, and November is really for editing those and putting them all together. But we are coming back to several serial killers. I think we're going to have a Halloween episode this year. There's a case that's been stuck in the back of my mind for a long time. I looked at it. It might be 2 episodes for me to say everything I have to say about that. And the same thing with today. I think we have 5 updates that I want to talk about. One of them may actually be an extra episode. If that's the case and this runs really long, I will put that in the feed as well. We're not super active on our Patreon or any of those things, but I've kind of shied away from like hiding things from the audience. I think subscriptions and Patreons are kind of the wrong way to go. We don't do a ton of advertising on the show. We just sort of cover our costs and we kind of move on from it because, it's a weird time for true crime podcasts. It's a weird time for true crime in general. And that's sort of how we get to all these different updates that we have. I would say where I kind of want to start today is a strange one. We've talked about this case off and on over the years. There have been some interesting updates. I sat in virtually on a press conference related to this case, but I think, did you see the press conference in this case or were you doing something else?
I saw the link. I didn't have a chance to listen to it, though.
Okay. There's an update in the Morgan Nick case. And the Morgan Nick case has always been very interesting for me. For those of you who may not know about Morgan Nick, I'll give like a glancing overview. There's a wiki link out there somewhere that you can find with this. But Morgan Nick was born September 12th, 1988. What we know her for is on June 9th of 1995 when Morgan and her mother, depending on who you hear say this name, it's either Colleen or Colleen. They were at a little league baseball game in the town of Alma, Arkansas. And around 10:30 p.m., Morgan had asked her mom if she could go and catch fireflies with some of the other kids that were at the game. Her mom was not super sold on letting her go with her friends, but she decided to let her go. And sometime between 10:30 and 10:45 p.m., they see her for the last time. Her friends reported that at 10:45 p.m., she was standing near her mom's car, Miss Nick's car, and they were emptying their shoes out because they'd gotten sand in their shoes. What we're told, this is 29 years ago, and these are little kids, is that they saw Morgan talking to someone who looked a little creepy while she was knocking the sand out of her shoes and then put her shoes back on. So the game ends and the friends all gather back with their families. And the story is that the kids told Morgan's family that she was at the car. And when her mom went to look for her, Morgan wasn't there. That is the last time that Morgan Nick was seen or heard from. And when she's knocking the sand out of her shoes, she's never been heard from since then. Over the years, she has popped up on America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries. I even saw them on one of those home makeover shows where something had happened to their house and it had been damaged, and there was a crew out there to rebuild their home. In January of 2002, there were digs done in Boonville, Arkansas by the police where the police thought Morgan might have been buried there. In 2010, at the end of the year, it was right before Thanksgiving 2010, in Spiro, Oklahoma, the FBI got involved in a search to look for DNA evidence that might show if Morgan Nick had been at this house. And then in December 2017, same house, investigators showed back up and they wanted to do a search. They had a search warrant with them. Now, cadaver dogs alerted investigators to a hole dug on the property that some people have described as a well. And the authorities at the time said that that might be the center of their investigation. This search goes on for about 24 hours, and then it's called off on December 19th. Now, according to the FBI, the local police in Alma, the state police out there, new leads have come in Morgan Nick's disappearance every year, and they've been investigated. In November 2021, we spoke briefly about an announcement they made where they had named a man named Billy Jack Links as a person of interest in the investigation into the disappearance of Morgan Nicks. Now, Billy Jack Links had died in 2000. He was a very old man. He drove a red pickup truck, and there was a red pickup truck that had been seen at the site of Morgan Nick's disappearance. And there's been a documentary, and I think a series has come out about Morgan Nick as well. Have you seen those recently?
I watched the docuseries, and I was trying to remember how far back that was. I remember that After watching it, I was disappointed, but I was hopeful. And then it seemed like that panned out as far as this is just in like my own recollection, right? I didn't go back and watch it again or anything because I was aware of sort of the entirety of what happened. And, once I watch something and get the information, I'm not interested in being let down again. So I was totally waiting for something new. But the docuseries did leave me with hope that it wasn't exhausted yet, which I think is exactly what has happened here, right?
Yeah. Ridley Scott produced a docuseries. It came out in February of 2023. If you can find it, it's probably on Hulu. It's a great watch. He recently did a thing on the Missy Witt case called At Wit's End. His production company is very active in these true crime, well-produced docuseries that are just a couple episodes long. They ran with the idea from the November 2021 announcement with the FBI, and they found that, and they present this in the docuseries, that fibers found in the red pickup truck that Billy Jack Links had owned matched Morgan's shirt, or were a close match to Morgan's shirt. Now, this truck had been owned by multiple people since Billy Jack Links had sold it. And apparently this year, the Alma police, they came back and on September 29th, they made this announcement and sent all of us a little press release saying they were going to have a news conference on Morgan's case and that there was a significant development in the case. I ended up tuning into it, which I think it actually ended up happening on October the 1st of 2024. So it's been a couple of weeks, but they have a press conference and they say that the Alma Police Department wants to announce that there was DNA evidence found in the interior of this red truck that once belonged to Billy Jack Links, who had been named a couple years earlier as a suspect in this case. They found DNA linked to Morgan's family. So DNA from the Nick family matches hair that's found in Billy Jack Link's truck. And the Alma police chief is a guy named Jeff Pointer. He stated that the conclusions that were being made were that there was a strong indication Morgan had been in this truck. Now, you'll see this in the docuseries, or if you go and look up more information. There were multiple sightings of this truck around town in the hours of after when Morgan Nick goes missing. And some of the stuff there, kind of like you said, I have hope that some of the tips they've had are starting to line up, and maybe they'll actually be able to recover Morgan Nick. I will say this. I dug kind of deep into this, and Billy Jack Links does not match what I remember to be the composite sketch from the time. But he has a son who closely matches. Now, the crime that he's an assault on a woman more his age-ish, but he looks more like the person that I thought police were looking for back when Morgan Nick went missing. And I only say that because Billy Jack Links would have literally been in his 70s. And I could see a predator slowing down and going after children in their older years. He's been linked to other crimes. When he died, he was in prison. We've talked about him briefly on here, and I'm mentioning his son now because I couldn't help but notice the resemblance he had to the sketch of the person that I thought they were looking for. But again, this type of update gives me a lot of hope that maybe they will solve the disappearance of Morgan Nick. Did you have a lot to add to this?
It seems like, and now I can't remember. And, once there's a press conference out, it's hard to go back and get the information that you had before, right?
Yeah.
Because it gets basically
Lost.
It gets lost, right? Because it's overwhelmed with the new information. And I was trying to remember. He was pretty much the only, and I'm talking about Billy Jack Links, not his. What's his son's name?
Andrew Links.
Andrew. Okay, I'm talking about Billy Jack Links. He's been the only person ever named. Is that right?
Yeah, the only serious suspect. Yeah, you can see rumors online if you go hunting enough, but he's the one that was He was the one that was named by authorities.
Right. And, typically it's crazy sometimes when it goes like full circle and you still don't have a situation where, they still haven't found her. If it was Billy Jack, I mean, he's long dead, right?
Right.
And so I can see where it might stall out a little bit, but this little girl's body is somewhere.
Yeah, it's
And
sort of haunting too to think about that.
well, it is. And I do, I was surprised. I always thought Billy Jack Lynx was too old. And did you say how old he would have been?
I think if I read everything correctly, I think he would have been 70. I pulled up at some point I pulled up his obituary and I went backwards. Billy Jack Lynx was born in 1924. So.
And Morgan Nick was kidnapped in 1995.
Yeah, so when he dies,
So
he dies August 5th, 2000. So he was 75 years old when he died. He was born October 22nd, 1924.
And so his son would have been more in his late 20s?
When I pulled him up, I pulled up his offender profile. I think he's 54 now. So if you go back, yeah, he's going to be 25 years old, 26 years old, thereabouts. And when she goes missing.
And that was more akin to the composite.
Yeah, the composite they have, if you go out there and look at the Morgan Nick Foundation, I think still has it out there. At one point I had pulled up his kind of criminal history. The thing they jump on for him is, I read this recently on 5 News Online. There was an article put out by Kaylee Bignod sometime early October this year. It said a look into the criminal history of Billy Jack Lynx, the main suspect in the Morgan Nick case. So the son also has a criminal history, Andrew does, but this is what makes them steer that direction. And the byline is Crawford County, Arkansas. It says, for nearly 3 decades, the tight-knit Alma community has struggled with not knowing what happened to Morgan Nick, a 6-year-old who disappeared from a ballpark in June of 1995. She's remained missing since then, and her case remained cold, but it still has an active investigation. And then they talk about the press conference. But they say Billy Jack Lynx was born in 1924, raised in Crawford County. He later joined the Army, served in World War II, and he made his way back to the River Valley area. In 1992, he was charged with sexual abuse before he was released. 3 years later, court records show that Lynx attempted to abduct an 11-year-old girl in a Sonic parking lot in Van Buren, Arkansas. That's 8 miles away from the Alma ballpark where Morgan went missing from. He was charged at that time with sexual solicitation, and he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. That abduction attempt was just a few weeks after Morgan had been reported missing. Another detail flagging investigators was the red truck that he owned. He owned a red 1986 Chevrolet pickup truck. It slightly matches the truck seen in a home video taken the night Morgan was reported missing and reviewed by police as evidence. That's in the docuseries as well. The hangup was that Lynx didn't have a camper shell on his pickup when he was arrested in August of 1995. But according to court documents, a neighbor told police during the attempted abduction investigation that they think Lynx had a camper shell on his pickup truck, but it had been gone for a couple of months by the time he's arrested in August for the attempted abduction.
Well, I mean, I would certainly be incorrect in saying that I felt like he was too old, right? Because there's more to it that backs that up.
He gets arrested in December of 1992, and at that point in time, it's reported that he had sexually abused and raped a young victim. It specifically says engaged in sexual intercourse or deviant sexual activity with another person who is less than 14 years of age. Now, just to be clear, this is before Morgan goes missing, and it's an Arkansas State Police investigation. So it is not related to the Alma police at all. He gets held on $10,000 bail, and he ends up pleading guilty to that charge in January of 1993, so about a month later. But he agreed to accept a no contest plea. No contest plea, for those of you who don't know, is when you accept punishment, you don't admit guilt or fault.
And so how long was he in jail?
So he got a conviction for first-degree sexual abuse. It was a Class C felony at the time. Now, if you go look at Arkansas statutes, that doesn't exist anymore. But he doesn't get any time in jail. He gets sent to a counseling program in Fayetteville, Arkansas at the VA hospital. He had to pay a fine and he had to pay court costs. By the time you look at it all, it's about $1,000. But just for context, the Class C felony related to all of this is sexual indecency with a child now, and that carries a punishment of 3 to 10 years in prison. I'm only pointing this stuff out because it sort of assuaded me from the perspective of thinking he's too old for this. This article went on to say that in the original arrest affidavit filed in 1995, a detective with the Van Buren Police Department in the attempted abduction said that around 6:45 p.m., an 11-year-old girl was walking in Van Buren with 3 of her brothers and another friend. A white male in a red pickup pulled up to them and began talking about sexual matters. This is what the state trooper writes the Van Buren police write in their report. He says the man began asking the girl, while still in his truck, if she wanted to talk about money. She replied asking, why money? And according to police, he asked her to come closer. And she did, but she asked her brothers and friend to get their bikes and come with her. The man then handed 4 $1 bills to the boys and told them to leave, and the boys left. So while they're alone, this man and the 11-year-old girl, he asked her to come home with him to perform sex acts, and she told him she didn't do that. But he drops a cigarette on the ground and asks her to pick it up. She screams, and she ran away from him, and she told her brothers to call the police. So the man got in his truck. He tried to flee, but he strikes a wooden light pole beside the street and leaves red paint on the pole. In court documents, the man is described by these witnesses as a white male with a black and gray beard, sandy brown hair, and saggy cheeks, wearing a red ball cap and a brown uniform shirt. A separate witness was able to get the red pickup truck's license plate number. They checked the license plate, and the license plate goes back to Billy Jack Links. They go then and check his criminal history, and that's when they uncover the 1992 charge against this young girl. So that's how we get him here.
Right, okay. And that was known quickly. How far away was it?
8 miles. The Sonic that they're all at where this is happening and the accident takes place is 8 miles away from...
How about her brothers took $1?
I don't know what to say to that.
No, they're kids. I mean, it doesn't matter. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. I would say that there's a possibility before the DNA matched that this could have been out of whole cloth, right?
Yeah.
With DNA match, there's no question. I'm not sure why maybe he aged a lot. I don't know why he doesn't quite match the composite, but I remember the video. It's really interesting because life was so different back then, right?
It really was, yeah.
You've got this like VHS that's like barely playing anymore, and they're scoping out because basically it was somebody filming something and it's got the parking lot in the background, right?
Yeah.
That's how they were able to sort of decipher. I think that basically they were just going off of the children that were with Morgan, like what they had seen, right? And so, they were literally just running back from where they were playing. They were probably hardly paying attention, not to mention they were kids. I mean, this was a typical thing in the 90s for kids to be running all over the place at ball fields, right?
Yeah.
It's such a tragic story. She's such a sweet, cute 6-year-old, right?
Yeah, just a little kid, yeah.
That, it seems a lot different than, because he wasn't like talking to her like he was talking to the 11-year-old. There was always something a little bit off, but I fully believe if they found the DNA, that case is, essentially wrapped up if they could find her. I do feel like there is, well, maybe not, but there is somebody that he associated with that could give some insight that maybe if they could, think about where would he have put her.
Yeah, I don't know how that part's going to go, and I'm not going to speculate much on it. I am going to come back to Andrew Links for a second, because I had pulled an article. I think I sent you his offender profile where he's non-compliant. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And that was a Missouri offender profile that I sent over from the state of Missouri. But I think Whitney Bermes, Bermes, wrote an article for the Bozeman Daily Chronicle back in May of 2012. And it says Bozeman man sentenced to prison for rape. I think it matches up with what I thought that offender profile referenced. And it just says, in what attorneys on both sides deemed a bizarre case, a Bozeman man Wednesday was sentenced to a decade in prison for breaking into a woman's home and raping her last year. Andrew Lee Links, 43, so he's 43 in 2012, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for felony charges of sexual intercourse without consent and robbery. When Links is released, he will have to register as a sex offender with a moderate risk of reoffending. Gallatin County Deputy Attorney Ashley Whipple said this is probably one of the most bizarre cases I've worked in the last 15 years. According to charging documents, during the early morning of February 22nd, 2011, Links forcibly entered a woman's home, demanded money from her, and then sexually assaulted her. Links told the victim to be quiet or he would shoot her. The victim's roommate heard the victim yelling and crying, "Get off of me," along with a man's voice, and she called police, and officers arrested Links in the home. At Wednesday's sentencing, Links' victim asked Gallatin County District Court Judge John Brown to impose a strict sentence. "My life has been changed," she said. "I pity him for the fact that he takes no responsibility for his actions." The victim's roommate told the judge that because of the attack, she doesn't feel safe in her own home anymore. "Every single night this crosses my mind," she said, choking back tears. "It's not fair." Links apologized to the two women and said he was more than willing to take responsibility for his crimes. He said, "I'm sorry. Beyond words, I'm sorry. I hope both of you can move on and be okay." Whipple said the case is so strange because Links, up until this point, had no criminal history that would point to any crime of this type. Counselors cannot figure out why Andrew Links raped the woman. When entering the plea, Links said that he was intoxicated and does not remember committing the crime. He doesn't understand why he did what he did, and that makes him a loose cannon. Links' attorney, Peter Oman, said that Links was remorseful. When Oman visited Links in jail shortly after his arrest, Oman said the first thing Links asked was if the two women were okay. "That immediate kind of empathy is extremely rare," said Peter Oman. "He is sincerely devastated by what he's done." Links' sister, Darlene Yostin, she traveled from Arkansas to speak on behalf of her brother. She told the judge that her family was very surprised to hear of Links' behavior. "We're all just in shock," said Darlene. While Oman asked Brown to sentence Links to 5 years in prison, he agreed with the state's recommendation of 10 years. Links' actions may have been out of character, but I don't know what triggered those actions. It's of great concern that nobody knows why this happened, said the judge. Links will receive credit for the 462 days he's already served in jail, and after his 10-year prison sentence, Links will serve 20 years of probation. Okay, so that's his kid.
Right, but all that's garbage. I don't know why I did it.
The family acting like they're surprised.
Well, of course, it's embarrassing, and it's not enough to be immediately remorseful, okay? In a civilized society, you have to actually have enough empathy for other people and self-awareness that you don't do things that you're going to be immediately remorseful for. Yeah. To me, it is garbage because and I do feel like that's a way for him to have not taken responsibility for it.
Absolutely.
Because, and him saying "Oh, I am taking responsibility for it." Well, you did it because you could.
Right.
And because you made poor decisions and you didn't have the self-control to not do it, right? That's why that's why it happened. So, I don't know. It seems to me like even the judge is like indulging that situation, or he's like pointing out how ridiculous it is. I can't really tell by the tone, but like, oh, it's alarming that nobody knows why this happened, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because like it's not alarming. Of course he knows why it happened. He did it because he could. He has to not do it in the future, right?
I gotcha. Yeah, I follow what you're saying now. At first I was like, what do you mean? But now what you said makes perfect sense. Yes, this guy did it because he's, got some serious problems with how he treats women, and this type of assault
right, because
is a power
there's a situation happening to start with. Now, my initial thought on it was he was probably on drugs, and then it escalated to the sexual assault. But I don't think he would have raped a man if that's who he ended up robbing.
So you think it's a crime of opportunity where it really was the focus was money, and then all of a sudden it escalates
because he could.
Yeah, that sounds plausible. I mean, I've heard of that happening. I think those cases when that's where your opportunity goes during some type of home invasion that was going to be a robbery, you take advantage of someone like that and do that kind of assault is terrible.
Well, and I would say there's a vast difference between property crimes and violent crimes, right?
Yeah.
However, like it makes no difference as far as like, oh, well, I was just going to rob the place, right? Whatever. I mean, you're asking for escalation, in my opinion, when you start down that road, right? As the perpetrator is what I'm saying. And so I find it odd. I feel like it would have been better for everybody to have been more direct in reprimanding him as opposed to just sort of going along with whatever
100%. That guy needs a heavy dose of reality.
And so the other thing that's sort of interesting, you said that was in 2012. Is that right?
2011 is when it occurred. 2012 is when he ends up being. Are you thinking DNA, by the way?
I was actually thinking because the DNA matches it's genetically linked to the victim, right?
Right.
And the truck belongs to the perpetrator, right?
Correct.
And so, no, what I was thinking was if Billy Jack had gotten like a real sentence for what he did in like 92 or 93.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been out to take Morgan, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because this guy, I mean, obviously he was dealing with an adult and he sexually assaulted a woman and he got only 10 years for it, right?
Correct.
However, that's 10 years he's going to be in jail. And to me, like crimes against children, it's hard to sort of get a grasp on that because a lot of times juvenile victims, you don't get a lot of details, nor do I think people should just randomly get details of children being victimized. It's hard to sort of scale it, as far as like, I mean, if it happens, they should be punished severely, right? If there's questions, I can see why like other things occur. But it seems like he got nothing but a slap on the wrist, right? Like, oh, you need to go into a program that's not going to do anything.
The way they kind of treat that 1992 case is like this is a 68-year-old man who's was some sort of good person, and now it's an anomaly. It's weird behavior, man.
Well, and you said like maybe he slowed down and went after kids. I think that going after children, especially a 6-year-old, that's an opportunity or a type.
Yeah, there's a lot about the dynamics of like maybe how things were when his children were growing up that we don't have an opportunity to explore here. And I don't know what would turn him into that situation where we really clearly have him in 92 and 95 committing crimes against children miles away from where this disappearance of a cute little girl who went missing, so when we look at all this, it's sort of a disaster in the making. I just was pointing it out from the perspective of the hope
update.
that maybe this update is leading somewhere. I don't know
Let me-
exactly what they're looking for with these announcements, but I assume it's like witnesses that may have seen where the body was put.
Well, right. I feel like, well, plus they're trying to put closure on the case, right? I mean,
100%, yeah.
There's no reason why that DNA should be there, right? Unless he was involved.
There would have to be like some kind of strange, like I don't see anything right now that makes it make sense where I
The
look at
other
it.
thing is possibly, I mean, I definitely don't believe that this guy just randomly became a pedophile in his 70s.
Well, okay. I'll just say the thing and we'll decide if we're going to edit it out later. A lot of times when you abuse your children and their friends and then they grow up and have children, families split up over things like that where they don't talk for a long time. You run out of victims and you go looking elsewhere. So it's not that he randomly became a pedophile. And I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just saying there could be a pattern here where he simply no longer had children having children around him. And he had to go look for children if he wanted to take advantage of them. But I have to say that the abduction attempt that's around the time of Morgan's disappearance is an interesting type of bold, where you pull up alongside a child and you start talking about sex with them and then offer them money. And the dollar bills to the brothers to go away type thing, that's weird.
All of it's weird. All of that is weird. All of it is weird. And like,
if that were in a movie, we would be like, no, I think we got to cut that. It's not realistic. But then you have this account of it happening.
right. And it's so rare. So Morgan Nick's case, which I feel like it's been like fair, because even knowing like what happened shortly after Morgan Nick disappeared, with what he ultimately went to jail for, even with that whole situation with the video, with the truck, with the possibility of the fibers matching, now this DNA match, he is not associated with Morgan Nick or her family in any way.
Not according to everything I've read, no.
It is a complete random occurrence.
Correct.
And it is the rarest of the rare. With regard to, now, I think he snatched Morgan. I think he grabbed her. I don't think he coaxed her into the car. I think he was hanging out at the ball field for whatever reason. And I think he saw the opportunity and he took it. And to me, that's one of the things that makes her case, such a standout case. We're talking about, we're going on 30 years.
Yes, it's it'll be 30 years coming up, but yeah, 29 years and some change right now. Yeah.
Right. And she vanished. Right. I mean, they've never found anything of her. And that's odd. That's an odd situation that nothing has resurfaced. So it is the rarest of the rare type of situation, unless there's something, that everybody missed. But I don't think there is.
No, I don't. I don't think so. And we talk just like for edification purposes. We talk about them searching these homes and stuff. Now, if you look at, I know I mentioned Oklahoma, and that sounds like, another place. If you're not from Oklahoma or not from Arkansas, these places sound so far away sometimes. But, Spiro, Oklahoma, where they're searching this vacant home, is part of the Fort Smith, Arkansas, like metro area. Now, all the places that we're mentioning when we say Alma, Spiro, Boonville, these are all tiny places. They're like I think Alma, Arkansas, as of this year, probably has 5,000 or 6,000 people. If I remember correctly, Spiro, Oklahoma has a declining population, and they may be down to like 1,500 people. So these are areas where you have a limited number of people who could have seen something in terms of body disposal. And I think that's why the police are reaching out. And we're talking about this case again, because that's the last piece of the puzzle in this case is where is Morgan Nick?
Right. And so with the limited number of people who possibly saw something and the declining population and the just sort of general area we're talking about here is it expansive land that
there's a lot of land in some of these areas. That's the problem. If you're in a house, there's chances she could be found if she's buried in the basement or near a house. But if we're just talking about he went out and dug a hole on an easement somewhere, like a utility easement or something, you may never find her without somebody saying, I saw his truck parked here and I saw him walking back from there. That's what the cops are looking for, is somebody who saw something the week after Morgan Nick went missing.
Right.
Ties to that.
Right. And putting something together. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what they're doing with this case. I wanted to bring it up because it was an update and I feel like her case is important. I feel like all missing children's cases are important. And, this one just happens to have a little bit of traction where I could talk about it.
Yeah. This is a case on my list. I feel like some of those cases are coming up these days. So, if it's on a 30-year cycle, that would be about right.
Well, speaking of, I have another update. You want to move on to another update? You have more about
Sure.
Morgan.
Yeah.
We talked briefly about this guy getting charged in Virginia, the capital region up there. And I think we talked about him about this time last year. Stephen Smirk, remember him?
Yes, because I made the comment about when he was born. They were like, look at his face.
Yeah, he's kind of a weird dude. So investigators caught up with him in September 2023 and they charged him with a 30-year-old murder. This guy lived in Niskayuna, and Patrick Tyne writes for that on October 8th, 2024 for the Times-Union up there. He put together an article and it just says, man pleads guilty in decades-old Virginia cold case. So here's the gist of the article, and we'll talk about him a little bit. A man who led a quiet life as a husband and father admits he stabbed a woman to death in a random but premeditated attack nearly 30 years ago in Virginia. Stephen Smirk, 52, had been serving in the Army at a base in Arlington, Virginia, when in November of 1994, he left the barracks with the intention of killing someone. This is according to a narrative provided by Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney's office. He broke into the home of 37-year-old Robin Lawrence in nearby West Springfield, Virginia, and stabbed her 49 times while she and her 2-year-old daughter were alone in the house. Her body was found on November 20th, 1994, after her husband, who had been out of the country at the time, asked friends to go and check on Robin after he had not heard from her in several days. Prosecutors said that Smirk disposed of the knife in a body of water on the night of the killing. At the time of her death, Robin Lawrence was director of promotion and merchandising at Merchants Tire and Auto Center in Manassas, Virginia. She was from Syracuse. She had graduated from Carnegie Mellon. On Friday, the first Friday in October of 2024, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in a Virginia courtroom. DNA evidence was recovered from the crime scene, but did not match any genetic material in databases at the time. Police in Virginia were unable to solve the case for decades. Years later, police found a familial match with Smirk and began working with a DNA technology company in Northern Virginia that specializes in phenotyping and genetic genealogy analysis. Those are processes that predict the physical appearance and biological relationships from unidentified DNA evidence.
Right, and his composite from that is one that I remember seeing.
Yep, and it looks like him.
It does look like him. Yeah, they don't use those quite as much because they
can be more general in nature.
Well, because now in my mind, I don't really know if this is how it works, but it's just as easy to compare it to find the actual link to find the person as it is to make the phenotype composite.
Yeah.
With regard to like the databases that we have.
That is where we are now in time. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's why it kind of gets skipped over. Right.
Yeah.
but they do, I feel like it's still used when all that other stuff comes up empty.
Yeah, they're trying to put a face out there in some instances. It's interesting that you said it that way because they obtained photos of Smirk from 1988 and 1998 and then compared them to the composite images that had been developed. Fairfax County police detectives, they then went to see him in September 2023. They approached him as he was taking out the trash on South Country Club Drive. And he had been married with 2 teenage children. He'd been living in the area for at least 2 decades. They asked him for DNA, and he provided it, police said at the time. He later contacted the detectives and made a full confession at the local police station. And this is according to remarks made recently by Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis. He had been working as a software developer, Smirk had. And at the hearing about this, Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney Kelsey Gill read from a transcript of a video in which Smirk confessed to the killing. He said, "I've not killed anyone else, but I could be a serial killer. If not for my wife and kids, I probably would be a serial killer." It was not immediately clear if Smirk made the comments while speaking with police in Niskayuna or during subsequent interviews. He's going to be sentenced in February after a PSI or a pre-sentencing investigation, and he faces up to 70 years in a Virginia prison. He is currently 52 years old. So he would have been 22 when he did this.
Oh, wow. He's only 52.
Yep. He would have been 22 years old.
So he was one of those guys that was like waiting for it to happen. And I was just looking at the Parabon sketch, and I have to say, even the phenotype composite is even smirking.
So that one wrapped up. We had mentioned his case. So since I may even mention it again in season 6 when it comes around for sentencing.
Do you think that he was waiting?
Like
is this
he
one
knew
of
it
the
was going to happen?
Is this one of the cases where like he had no idea he was leaving something behind, but then after it happened, he knew he had left something behind, and so like when they showed up, he was like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah, he's one of those people that it would have been like that. Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like, actually, I don't see the confession very often, or I don't see the just sort of, what would you call it when somebody just gives in to the fact that like they've been caught? You see the denial.
It's an acquiescence.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. And so you're just like, oh yeah, okay, so this really did catch up with me, because I can imagine a situation where he might be questioning, like, did I leave something? That's so interesting to me.
Yeah, this was an interesting update. I put it in here. There's not much more to it right now. I am going to try and get a copy of his PSI. It's Virginia, so I should be able to get my hands on it now that he's pleaded guilty.
I'm just curious. Do you remember? Did we know he had confessed?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
He had made some interesting statements in there about he cut her up pretty good, and we knew that he had made a confession at some point. I think we recorded and mentioned that like he had made a confession.
But was she sexually assaulted?
She was one of those cases from the 90s where when I went to get information on her case, unrelated to this guy, because I didn't know about him at all, I had just put it in as a request for an unsolved murder case.
Mm-hmm.
And there was very little information available. And now when you go look for it, you could go read on, I think newspapers.com had a little bit about her, but when you go read about it now, unfortunately, the feed is clogged with information about this guy.
Right, exactly. Because right before we found out who it would have been a completely different search result, right?
Correct.
I just remember the smirk on his face, but it's definitely one of those interesting. He's so much younger than I thought he was.
You mean like he looks older? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean the fact that he's 52 years old is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. She would have been older than him. He would have been like killing an older woman back then.
Right. And I guess I I mean, I'm not 52 years old, but it's way closer in age to me than I imagined.
So that's my update there. I have one more update that I'm going to throw into this episode because we talked about this case a couple of times. Correct me if I didn't release this, but I think I did. Otherwise, you may have some backward stuff in the future here. This is from October 3rd, 2024. And I know we initially talked about this case. This is the case of the au pair, also in Virginia, Fairfax.
This has been released.
There's a double murder that happened up there in February 2023, and it was so confusing for you and I to look at it and figure out where authorities were going. And we now have a little more information on that. The double murder...
It was in all the staging in the world, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. So this is the double murder of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. And Joseph Ryan was potentially a stranger to Christine Banfield and the Banfield family. Christine Banfield was a married woman. Her husband was Brendan Banfield. They had a small child, and they had an au pair named Juliana Perez Malgahis. And so the au pair was charged with second-degree murder in the killing of Joseph Ryan. And the update in this case as of October 3rd or so is that Brendan Banfield has now been indicted. I pulled an interesting thing from Court TV. I'm going to run a little bit of it by you. It ran on the Associated Press as well. It just says details in cases against Brendan Banfield and au pair revealed in court. An expert blood stain pattern and forensic analyst helped investigators pursue charges against a Virginia husband accused of killing his wife and another man at the married couple's Fairfax County home. This was said during a bond hearing for Brendan Banfield. Last month, in September 2024, a grand jury indicted Brendan Banfield on charges of aggravated murder in the February 23 killings of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. At the time of his arrest, which occurred more than a year after the incident, Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney Steve Descano said new information found in the officials' investigation was instrumental in securing today's indictment, but he declined to elaborate further. During the bond hearing, Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney Eric Klingon said police had received in August 2 definitive reports from expert forensic investigators who spent more than a year reviewing evidence. He said the reports were foundational in supporting prosecutors' theory that Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield's bodies were moved and had been repositioned after they were fatally wounded. According to Klingon, he said that Joseph Ryan's arms were moved and smeared with Christine Banfield's blood. John Carroll, who is Brendan Banfield's attorney, he argued in court that Klingon's narrative of what happened was not evidence of the husband killing his wife. He actually told the judge it just doesn't add up. At the end of the hearing, Fairfax County Judge Penny Askerett denied Brendan Banfield's bail, requiring the defendant to remain in the county jail until his trial, which currently has a February date, but we know how that goes. It's probably not going to be in February, particularly if it's a complex case. And I'm pretty sure this will be declared a complex case based on some of the nonsense related to it.
You think that they'll stick it out? Well, especially the husband. You think that they'll take it to trial?
That girl's going to plea out.
Well, I mean, she confessed basically to the 911.
She's supposed to. She did. She's supposed to go on trial in November. I mean, there's some slight possibilities she didn't totally understand what was happening. I don't know that I believe that, but I could go with it if I saw the evidence.
Right, but like basically, I feel like the reality and the presented narrative they excluded one another. Because
I took some notes from Court TV and from Vinnie Politana. And I wanted to run them by you. Can I tell you some of these things?
Sure.
So they said that the blood spatter evidence was only one part of it. And they said authorities have said the killings were part of a larger scheme between the au pair and the husband. And they say the romantic relationship between the two of them started in August 2022. So that means they've got some evidence if they're putting a date on it. 6 months before the killings, Juliana and Brendan Banfield had gone on a trip to New York together, and they found photographic evidence of a romance, whatever that means. The prosecutor also said that other women had come forward to inform detectives that Brendan Banfield had been participating in multiple extramarital affairs during his marriage. According to the prosecutor, he said multiple credible women confirmed this fact, including one in particular who told them during the course of their affair with the defendant a few years ago, he would constantly promise to leave his wife, but eventually he told her it would be so much easier for us if she was not around. And then, of course, you mentioned on the day of the killings, they have Juliana calling 911 2 times within minutes. She did not first speak with first responders there. She hung up. But 10 minutes later, she called a final time and reported it as an emergency. Brendan Banfield then spoke into the phone and said that he had shot a man who had stabbed his wife. Authorities arrive at the Banfield's home. They find that Joseph Ryan had been fatally shot. Christine Banfield was suffering from stab wounds. She was taken to the hospital where she later died. Clan said following the killings, Juliana told authorities that she and Brendan left the house early that morning and they left Christine Banfield home alone. She said that she and Brendan returned later that morning after the au pair saw Joseph Ryan, who the allegation is he was trespassing, but they had seen him enter the home. When Juliana and Brendan go inside, the two found Ryan holding a knife to Christine Banfield's throat. This is according to Juliana's statement, of course. She alleged that Joseph Ryan had stabbed Christine Banfield and that Brendan Banfield then shot Joseph Ryan. Juliana also told authorities that she shot Joseph Ryan once with a second firearm. The problem is she sort of gives away on the 911 call that she's been prompted to do so. During court hearings for Juliana, prosecutors questioned her account of events, and they argued that Joseph Ryan was not a violent person. So, according to the prosecutors in Brendan's case, Joseph Ryan came to the house after matching up with an online profile portraying themselves as Christine Banfield on a website for people interested in sexual fetishes. Authorities then alleged that Joseph Ryan came to the home after messaging the profile's user on Telegram. So they went to a second location. By the way, a second location is always a sign that there's some kind of staging or something is up. They move off of that website onto Telegram, which is an anonymous app, and they scheduled a sexual rendezvous. Joseph Ryan had told one of his friends that Christine's marriage was not entirely monogamous, and added that Brendan Banfield, to his knowledge, meaning Joseph Ryan, was aware of this extramarital activity by his wife. In the 11 months between Juliana's arrest and Brendan's indictment, authorities have been monitoring their phone conversations out of the Fairfax County Jail. A few weeks ago, the prosecutor says that Juliana and Brendan Banfield had a brief phone call in which he said, "I hope that you are not staying with me because you're afraid I'm going to turn on you."
Who said that?
Juliana said that to Brendan.
Were they both in jail when that happened?
No, he was not in jail yet.
Okay, I was like, man, they're letting inmates talk to one another.
No, he was out of jail, but that was another thing that sort of spurred on the whole idea that he was
right, and she seems to be like sort of oblivious to those types of comments, right? They were because when we talked about this previously, it was I think it was at the beginning of this year, actually, but the whole narrative was different. The narrative was the au pair left with the child, and once they got to a certain point, they had forgotten the lunches.
Yes.
And she turned around and went back, and then she said that there was a car there she didn't recognize, so she got the father, who's, Brendan. And I remember saying, like, so if there's a weird guy in the house, like, why on earth would your au pair and child be like right behind you, right? There's absolutely no reason for them to be going into the house. Then I had speculated, I felt like they had probably killed the mom before.
Yeah.
Right. Before, because this was basically like, this is Brendan Banfield thinking he's pulling something over on everybody, right?
Yeah.
And poor Joseph Ryan got stuck in the middle of a disaster, and all the women came forward because they're all like, yeah, that could have been me, thinking about Juliana, right?
Yeah.
And I was very disheartened at when we covered it initially because I wasn't sure that they were going to be able to charge him. So I'm very glad that they were able to put together the evidence to do so. I do think that I hope you're not staying with me because you don't want me to turn on you comment, I think it was really valuable to his prosecution. I believe that he's probably 95% responsible for this. The au pair is not going to have any reason to kill her boyfriend's wife, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to have that deep ingrained thing. And then I have to say, why didn't they just get divorced?
We always ask that question. A lot of times, my personal opinion on what's happening there is money. That's a big thing. Sometimes it's children.
Right, because money's all good right now, right?
Money's good at the moment, but the minute you get divorced...
No, I mean like now that he's gone to jail for it.
Oh, well, he thought he was going to get away with it. But, he look, in my opinion, I am not knocking a pair. Some of them are brilliant, brilliant people. They're doing this for a myriad number of reasons. At one point, I think you have even been, you were a nanny many, many years ago when you were like 30 years ago, right?
Yes, I was a babysitter. Yeah, I was a nanny.
So, in my opinion, if you're going to commit this type of murder, I don't know that the young au pair is the one to help you carry this out.
Right, but you're going to have a really hard time finding anybody to help you.
Yeah, the minute they agree to help you, you should really be evaluating whether you should do this or not. And the answer is always no. But if you're going to move forward with this, know that, like, this is how it ends.
Well, and in my opinion, he was setting Joseph Ryan up to take the fall for his wife's murder, and he was setting the au pair up to, if the self-defense thing wasn't bought and they both didn't get off scot-free, she was going to take the blame for it. And, that's what I saw playing out, and I thought it was terribly unfair. But I also don't feel like I don't feel like Juliana is an innocent party in this. I felt like they should be blamed, more equally for what transpired. Because, at that point in time, it was just her. She was the only one getting, because she talked to the police. And remember, that was another point we made in the other episode, was that this is an example of the difference, because he didn't talk to police. He immediately got an attorney, didn't talk to police. She had basically said what happened over the 911 call, and then she did talk to police. But in the 911 call, it was, I shot him again at the prompting of Brendan Banfield. He told me to go to the other room and get the other gun. It was like this whole thing. It was so weird. Yeah. It was like somebody had written it out for her. But it wasn't a situation. It was like he was still moving, so I shot him again. Well, that's not self-defense, right?
No. You don't finish him off unless he's a threat.
Right. You shoot somebody because you're afraid they're going to kill you, not because they're still moving.
Yeah.
You don't give them a nice, clean shot to finish them off.
Yeah, so this is a trial, like, particularly with the au pair's trial, if she goes to trial, which is scheduled for November of 2024. If she goes to trial, I will be paying a lot of attention to this.
I would be interested to see what all comes out, because it's got all the like elements that make for a really good story. Like, if you don't take into consideration there's actually human beings involved.
In my opinion, all entertainment purposes aside, I can very clearly see the narrative of what happened here from the outside. I'm dying to know if there's something that contradicts what I think. And so for that reason and that reason alone, I want to see what these prosecutors in Fairfax, Virginia put together on this case, because I am highly interested in a trial like this happening, because in my opinion, if I were either one of these people, in terms of Christine Banfield's husband, Brendan, or her nanny, Juliana with the long last name, I would not even consider putting my business out there for a trial if I had done this. I would be beelining my way to the nearest plea bargain that I could make work.
I think the business that's going to be out there is going to be deep. You also then have to think about, like, this is somebody who did this thinking like they were going to somehow get by with it. Because I don't think that. I mean, do you think if they knew they weren't going to get away with it, they would have done it?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I can't tell how. Like, there's so much wrong thought here with all of this that, like, I can get into the heads of disconnected serial killers easier than I can get into the head of people doing things like this, where you're masquerading one life and plotting this out against the person that you live with and have children with and have pledged to spend your life with. It is very confusing for me.
I don't know. I'm like you. I don't know what they're thinking, but I have to believe that they thought at the time that, like, they were going to get away with it, right? Like, oh, they're going to believe us when we say these ridiculous things, right? Or if they don't think they'll believe them, like, maybe they'll be like, well, they can't prove otherwise, which, I mean, in a very sinister mind, that could be the thinking. Okay. There's a whole lot of other ways, though, to deal with a situation where you don't want to be married to your wife anymore. I understand it could be difficult in a variety of ways, including financial ways. But I have to believe, because I don't believe that if they thought they were going to get caught and go to jail, that they would do it. Because, like, you're giving, what's the point in even not having your wife any longer if you're just going to be in jail for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And you took your child's parent away from them.
You took a life. You took a life. That alone is enough for me not to understand you. You took a life for 2 lives in this instance. You not only did you like the level of concoction that has to go into the scheme for Joseph Ryan to end up there is
right,
like special circumstances, death penalty eligible in my head.
Oh yeah, but I doubt it's going to go there. But
no, I don't think it will. But I'm just saying
that it was planned out, like, because we had talked before, like, we didn't think Mom, the victim, was even involved in getting Joseph Ryan over there that morning. Like, so it was very concocted, right?
Yeah, it was like crazy. I don't have a lot more on this one. I am going to follow this. This will be a trial that if it happens where I can get my hands on all the hearings and stuff, I will be doing it. This is almost one I would consider going to visit in person, but, like, I have a feeling it's going to be long, and I don't want to be in Virginia for months trying to figure this out. Did you have much more on this one right now?
I don't have anything else on it.
I got a missing persons case, and I don't know if you get these. We're gonna talk about it for a little bit because I put it in the queue for us to add into this episode. I went down a rabbit hole, and I don't know if you get this way with missing persons cases. I saw this case pop up. It's over a year old at this point, which is one of the reasons I'm bringing it up. It's a girl in Florida. And I don't know what it is about the case itself, but I looked at it and I remember thinking that will resolve itself shortly, like as soon as I heard about it. And then I thought, why hasn't someone done something about this? It has gotten a little bit of attention on, like, Dateline and whatnot. This case is out of Florida, specifically out of Marion County. She's been missing since March 2nd, 2023. She's considered endangered missing, which is, we don't know exactly what's happened, but I'm going to give you some of what's out there. Charlie Project's got some stuff on her, so does NBC. There's a Reddit thread that was really interesting to me. Fox 35 out of Orlando carried a case on her. I'm just going to talk about her for a few minutes because I fell into a rabbit hole in this case. And I don't know. I don't know how to explain when that happens. I just want to like tell you this rabbit hole, and we get some interesting tidbits if you follow the rabbit hole a little bit. Her date of birth is September 18th, 1996. She would be 28 years old if she's still with us. She's been missing since she's 26 years old. She's 5 feet, 1 inch tall, 120 pounds. She's a white female. Last seen wearing a black sweater, a light colored tank top with sequins, and either a black skirt or black pants, blonde hair, blue eyes. She has a tattoo on her right hip of a cocopelli, which is a fertility symbol, shown as a humped-back flute player. If you have any information on this case, you should call the Marion County Sheriff's Office, 352-732-9111. This is the case of Sarah Gail Ebersol. I may be saying her name wrong. I heard it Ebersol and Ebersol, but had you heard about this at all when I brought it up to you?
No, I don't think I had.
So, according to the Charlie Project, the details of her going missing are that Sarah is last seen in Reddick, Florida, a little after 10 p.m. on March the 2nd, 2023. She had texted her sister a few hours earlier, and she was trying to get a ride, but her sister couldn't give her a ride. This is home from work. So at 10:11 p.m., Sarah texts her sister and says, quote, she's getting into a random truck with some cowboys and hoped, quote, they took her for a ride. So she's seen on a surveillance video at the Circle K store on North Highway 441 in Reddick, Florida at the 17,900 block. It's a black pickup truck driven by 2 males. She never returns home. Authorities state that she's dropped off with James Robinson at his subdivided residence a little further down this road in Reddick, and that the two of them, James, Sarah, spent some time socializing with James Schaller and Tacisha McDermott, who lived on the other side of this like split residence. According to witnesses, Sarah left the house between 3 and 5 a.m. in a newer model blue Hyundai sedan, driven by a Hispanic male in his mid-30s with long dark hair and a thin build. Although the witnesses said they thought the car might have been an Uber, police were able to determine that Sarah had not called for an Uber the night she disappeared. They stated she could have taken an off-the-books ride, however, or gotten a ride from a third party. A year later, in March of 2024, investigators announced that a man named Tyrone Mormon was a person of interest in Sarah's case, and that they had determined that she had left with Tyrone Mormon on the night she was last seen. According to Sarah's sister, Sarah didn't know Tyrone. Authorities got a search warrant for his phone, which Tyrone Mormon had lied to the police and said he had broken his phone and it had been thrown away. But he finally turns it over for examination, and he gets arrested in December 2023 for giving law enforcement false information. I think it's an obstruction of justice charge, but neither here nor there. They put a picture of him on the Charlie Project profile, and he looks like he could fit the description of what the people who lived at the duplex said happened. He's thin and has kind of long hair. He stated that out of town at the time, he could not have been involved in Sarah's disappearance. He had never met her, but multiple witnesses contradicted his claims. Information on his phone indicated that the two of them were together at a 24-hour convenience store in the northwest part of Marion County during the early morning hours on March the 3rd. And then it wraps up saying, Sarah is the youngest of 7 children. She was primarily raised by her maternal uncle and aunt in Sarasota, Florida. At the time of her disappearance, she was divorced, lived with a roommate in the 9200 block of Northwest 60th Avenue, and she worked as an exotic dancer. She left behind a daughter who mostly resided with the child's father. Since her disappearance, there's been no activity on her social media or financial accounts. She took nothing with her, and her case remains unsolved.
I'm going to cut this one off here. Meg and I had a further discussion, but then we had to go digging into this case, and we realized that we were watching something unfold that maybe we don't always get to see. So I'm not going any further. Call the Marion County Sheriff's if you know anything about this case at this time. And I hate to do that to people, but I just felt like I needed to end this here, wrap up the episode with just me talking and saying, call Marion County on that, because the deeper we dig into that one, the stranger it gets. But thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.
This is just a reminder that we are part of the Zencastr Creator Network, and I put a link in the show notes if you guys want to check it out for your own podcasting needs. I've always enjoyed using Zencastr. Their quality is great, and we were able to join their creator network at kind of a key time in their history. I have enjoyed it. I've considered a lot of other places to record and a lot of other ways to put together and host and distribute our podcast. But I've stuck with Zencastr the longest. We've been with them for hundreds of episodes now. And I'm putting a link in the show notes where you can check out what they have to offer and see if it's something you would want to use.